If you have ever watched doors open for others and wondered why effort alone was not enough, this message is for you. Favor is not luck and it is not random. It is a spiritual force that responds to divine alignment. Many people pray for favor, but few understand the responsibility that comes with it. What if the access you desire is not delayed, but waiting for character catch up with grace? In the next few minutes, you will discover how true favor works, how it is sustained, and why it always points back to God. Stay with this message, because understanding this grace called favor can completely redefine your war, your influence, and your results. Favor is one of the most misunderstood dimensions of grace. Many desire it, few understand it, and even fewer stored it correctly. Favor is not merely being liked, accepted, or preferred by people. It is a divine influence upon a person that causes help, access, and acceleration to come from directions that logic cannot explain. When favor is at work, their results appear disproportionate to effort, and doors open without resistance. This is because favor operates beyond human systems. It is God stepping into human affairs to advance His purposes through a life. Favor does not negate process, but it can compress time. It does not replace diligence, but it gives diligence visibility. Many people labor faithfully, yet remain hidden, while others are suddenly brought into prominence. This difference is not always skill or intelligence. Often it is favor. Favor introduces a person into rooms they did not campaign for and places their name on lips they never met. Yet this grace must be understood carefully, because favor without wisdom can destroy faster than rejection ever could. At the foundation of favor is grace. Grace is God's enablement working within, and favor is often grace working around. Grace shapes the person, favor shapes the environment. When inner transformation aligns with divine purpose, favor begins to flow outwardly. This is why favor cannot be sustained without character. Many pray for favor, but neglect the discipline required to carry it. When favor arrives before maturity, pride, entitlement, and dependency on human approval can quietly replace humility and reverence for God. Favor also carries responsibility. It is never given merely for comfort or status. Favor is an assignment. God places favor on a life to advance something greater than personal ambition. When favor is reduced to self-promotion, it begins to decay. But when favor is stewarded with humility, it becomes a channel through which others are lifted, systems are transformed, and divine intentions are fulfilled. The true test of favor is not how high it lifts you, but how clearly it points back to God. One of the dangers surrounding favor is mistaking it for human loyalty. People may support you today and oppose you tomorrow. If confidence is placed in people instead of God, favor becomes fragile. True favor is not the consistency of human applause, but the constancy of divine backing. Even when opinions change, favor remains, because its source is not emotional approval, but divine intention. This is why a person walking in favor must remain grounded, prayerful, and discerning. Favor also attracts warfare. When God marks a life, resistance often follows. This does not mean favor has ended. It often means it has been recognized. Opposition is not proof of failure, but evidence of significance. However, the response to resistance determines whether favor will increase or diminish. When challenges are met with humility, obedience, and dependence on God, favor matures. When they are met with arrogance or self-reliance, Favor begins to withdraw. Ultimately, this grace called favor is not about ease, it is about effectiveness. Come, it is God saying, I will stand behind this life to accomplish my will. When favor rests upon a person, limitations are redefined, access is granted, and influence is multiplied. Yet the highest expression of favor is not visibility or acceleration, but faithfulness. A life that remains aligned, calm, surrendered, and grateful becomes a vessel God can continually trust. And when favor is rightly understood and rightly carried, it becomes a testimony that draws hearts, not to a person, but to the God who gives such grace. Favor as divine advantage goes far beyond the idea of comfort or popularity. It is the supernatural hand of God resting upon a person, causing outcomes that exceed natural capacity. When favor operates, it does not deny reality effort or limitation, but it overrides them. Human systems have rules, processes, and requirements. Yet divine favor introduces a higher order where God intervenes to accelerate, preserve, and elevate according to his purpose. That this is why favor often produces results that seem disproportionate to qualification, strength, or experience. It is not a reward for perfection, but an expression of divine intention. Natural limitations define what a person can ordinarily achieve. These limitations include background, resources, connections, timing, and even past failures. Without favor, progress is often slow and dependent on human approval and opportunity. With favor, however, these same limitations lose their authority. God's involvement amplifies capacity, allowing a person to function beyond what their history suggests. This amplification does not mean the absence of weakness, but the presence of divine backing. Weakness remains, yet it no longer disqualifies. Instead, it becomes the platform upon which God's strength is revealed. Divine favor also alters visibility. Many people labor faithfully, yet remain unseen, not because they lack value, but because exposure has not yet been granted. Favor brings recognition without striving. It causes the right eyes to see, the right ears to hear, and the right hearts to respond. This recognition is not forced, it is arranged. God positions individuals in moments and places where their contribution aligns with the need. Creating opportunity without manipulation. This is why favor often feels sudden, though it is usually the result of unseen preparation. Favor also reshapes resistance. In ordinary circumstances, resistance slows progress and drains energy. Under favor, resistance may still exist, but it loses its power to stop momentum. Obstacles become temporary rather than terminal. Delays become redirections rather than denials. This does not mean the path becomes easy, but it becomes purposeful. The individual begins to sense that even challenges are working in alignment with a greater plan. They're producing endurance rather than frustration. Another dimension of divine advantage is access. Access refers to entry into spaces, conversations, and decisions that shape outcomes. Without favor, access is restricted by hierarchy, protocol, or exclusion. With favor, access is granted unexpectedly. Doors open without explanation, and barriers dissolve without confrontation. This access is not earned through persuasion, but granted through divine orchestration. God places individuals where their presence becomes necessary, not optional. This kind of access cannot be sustained by charisma alone. It is maintained by humility and awareness of its source. Favor also protects. Amplification without protection would expose a person to unnecessary harm. Divine favor carries preservation, shielding individuals from consequences that would normally overwhelm them. This protection does not eliminate all difficulty, but it limits destruction. Mistakes do not become fatal, and opposition does not become final. God's involvement moderates outcomes, ensuring that progress continues despite imperfection. However, favor must be understood correctly to be sustained. When favor is mistaken for personal greatness, it becomes dangerous. Pride erodes awareness, and entitlement replaces gratitude. The individual may begin to assume that advantage is automatic rather than assigned. This misunderstanding disconnects favor from its source. True favor is sustained by recognition that it is God walking through a life, not a life outperforming others. Humility keeps favor active because it keeps the heart aligned. Divine favor amplifies a person beyond natural limitations, not to exalt the individual, but to advance divine purpose. It is God saying that human restriction will not stop what He intends to accomplish. When rightly understood, favor produces gratitude instead of pride, dependence instead of arrogance, and effectiveness instead of self-glory, allowing a life to function as a vessel through which divine intention finds expression in the world. Favor is often mistaken for coincidence, chance, or personal attractiveness, but in truth it operates as a spiritual force that responds to alignment with divine purpose. Luck suggests randomness, something that happens without meaning or direction. Favor, however, is intentional. It is released when a life comes into agreement with what God desires to accomplish. This alignment does not mean perfection or flawlessness. It means availability, obedience, and surrender. When a person's direction aligns with God's intention, favor begins to flow because heaven supports what reflects its will. Spiritual forces operate according to spiritual laws. Just as gravity responds to mass, favor responds to alignment when actions, motives, and direction are consistent with divine purpose. Favor becomes a natural consequence. This is why favor cannot be manipulated or demanded. It is not activated by desperation, but by positioning. A person may be gifted, intelligent, and hardworking, yet remain without favor if their direction is disconnected from God's intent. Conversely, someone with limited resources may experience extraordinary advantage because their life is positioned correctly. Alignment begins internally. Before favor affects circumstances, it reshapes the heart. Motives are refined, ambitions are purified, and priorities are reordered. A person aligned with divine purpose begins to seek meaning over recognition and impact over applause. This inward adjustment is often invisible to others, yet it is crucial. Favor flows most freely through lives that are not competing for attention, but cooperating with divine direction. When ego decreases, spiritual influence increases. As alignment deepens, favor manifests externally. Relationships form naturally, opportunities emerge unexpectedly, and progress occurs without excessive struggle. This does not mean effort disappears, but effort becomes effective. Energy is no longer wasted on pursuits that resist divine flow. Instead, momentum builds because actions are synchronized with purpose. Life begins to feel less forced and more guided. The individual may not always understand why doors open, but there is an increasing sense that movement is being supported rather than resisted. Misalignment, on the other hand, produces strain. When a person operates outside divine purpose, effort increases while results diminish. This is often mistaken for opposition or delay, when in reality it is resistance created by misdirection. Favor does not endorse every desire. It supports what aligns with divine intention. This is why certain paths feel unusually difficult despite prayer and effort. Realignment, not persistence alone, is often the missing element. Understanding favor as a spiritual force also explains its consistency. Luck is unpredictable, favor is reliable when alignment remains. As long as direction is maintained, favor continues to supply access, influence, and protection. This reliability builds confidence, not in self, but in divine guidance. The individual learns to trust alignment more than strategy. Decisions are made through discernment rather than pressure, because maintaining alignment becomes more important than immediate gain. This perspective also guards against pride. When favor is seen as luck, credit often goes to personality, skill, or timing. When favor is understood as a response to alignment, gratitude replaces arrogance. The individual remains aware that favor can diminish if alignment is compromised. This awareness encourages humility, teachability, and continued dependence on God. Success is not owned, it is stewarded. Ultimately, favor as a spiritual force reveals that life is not random. Progress, access, and influence are not accidents, but expressions of divine order. Alignment positions a life within that order, allowing favor to flow naturally. This understanding shifts focus from chasing opportunities to maintaining direction. They're from seeking approval to pursuing purpose, and from attributing success to chance to recognizing the quiet, intentional hand of God walking through a life that has chosen alignment over self-direction. Grace creates access, but character determines longevity. Many people encounter moments of favor, yet only a few sustain it over time. This is because grace can open doors instantly, while character is required to remain in the room. Grace is God's unearned enablement that positions a person for opportunity, visibility, and influence. It introduces speed and advantage beyond effort. However, grace does not override personal responsibility. When favor arrives without corresponding character, it exposes inner weaknesses rather than concealing them. Character refers to the inner structure that governs behavior when pressure, opportunity, and temptation arise. It is revealed not in private intentions, but in consistent actions. Grace may elevate a person quickly, but elevation magnifies everything within. Weaknesses that were once hidden become visible. Attitudes, habits, and values are tested at a higher level of exposure. Without character, the very favor that lifted a person becomes the environment in which they fall. One of the dangers of favor without character is entitlement. Grace can create the illusion that success is automatic or deserved. When entitlement replaces gratitude, humility erodes. The individual may begin to assume that access will always be available, and that consequences no longer apply. This mindset damages relationships and distorts judgment. People are no longer seen as partners in purpose, but as tools for advancement. Over time, trust weakens, and favor begins to withdraw quietly. Character sustains favor by producing consistency, while grace introduces moments. Character governs patterns. People may tolerate talent briefly, but they rely on integrity long-term. Reliability, honesty, self-control, and respect become essential when influence increases. Favor often brings a person into contact with systems and individuals that require trust. Without character, opportunities collapse under their own weight. With character, influence expands naturally because others feel safe investing trust. Grace attracts attention, but character retains respect. Attention is temporary, respect is enduring. Many are celebrated quickly, and and forgotten just as fast because their inner life cannot support their outer exposure. Character provides stability when emotions fluctuate and circumstances shift. It allows a person to respond wisely rather than react impulsively. This stability becomes a signal that favor is being stewarded well, not abused. Well, another critical aspect is accountability. Grace may remove barriers, but character accepts correction. A person sustained by character welcomes instruction and remains teachable even when successful. When correction is resisted, decline begins. Pride isolates, but humility preserves. Character keeps a person connected to counsel, boundaries, and truths, ensuring that favor does not become destructive. Character also governs how power is used. Favor often brings influence over decisions, resources, or people. Without character, power is used to dominate, manipulate, or self-protect. With character, power becomes service. The individual understands that influence is untrusted, not owned. This perspective preserves favor because it aligns with divine intention. God entrusts favor to those who will use it responsibly, not exploit it selfishly. Grace opens the door to possibilities, but character determines how those possibilities are handled. Many pray for favor without preparing their inner life to carry it. Yet preparation always precedes preservation. Character is not built in moments of elevation, but in seasons of obscurity. What is practiced in private sustains what is experienced in public. When favor arrives, character reveals whether the foundation is strong enough to support it. Ultimately, favor is sustained not by gifting, charisma, or momentum, but by the quality of the inner life. Grace may initiate the journey, but character determines its length. When grace and character work together, favor becomes stable, influence becomes trustworthy, and success becomes sustainable, allowing divine advantage to remain active without destroying the vessel through which it flows. Favor has the unique ability to create access, an opportunity that effort alone cannot achieve. Human effort operates within natural systems where progress is often determined by qualification, experience, strength, and connections. While diligence is necessary, it does not guarantee visibility or opportunity. Many individuals work tirelessly yet remain confined by limitations they cannot overcome through effort alone. Favor introduces a different dynamic. It allows God to intervene in human systems, rearranging circumstances in ways that bypass normal restrictions. Effort depends on recognition. Favor creates recognition. Without favor, a person may possess competence but remain unnoticed. With favor, that the same competence is highlighted at the right time and in the right place. This is not because effort is ignored, but because favor directs attention. God positions individuals where their skills meet a divine appointment. Opportunities arise not through aggressive self-promotion, but through divine orchestration. This is why favor often feels unexpected. It is not random, but it is beyond calculation. Favor also accelerates movement. Effort typically requires time to build momentum. Relationships must be developed. Trust must be earned and credibility must be proven gradually. Favor compresses this process. It introduces a person into environments where trust is granted quickly and responsibility is given early. This acceleration does not eliminate responsibility, but it removes unnecessary delay. God shortens pathways when it serves His purpose. What would normally take years can happen in moments because favor removes barriers that effort alone would struggle to overcome. Another aspect of favor is its ability to overcome resistance. In natural systems, opposition often halts progress. Effort can only push so far before exhaustion sets in. Favor changes the response of opposition. Hearts soften, policies shift, and circumstances align. Resistance does not always disappear, but it loses its authority to block progress. The individual experiences cooperation instead of constant struggle. This does not mean challenges end, but they no longer determine the outcome. FAVOUR also redefines qualification. Human systems often emphasize credentials and history. While these have value, they can also limit opportunity. FAVOUR allows God to override rigid criteria when necessary. This does not mean unprepared individuals are promoted irresponsibly, but that potential is recognized beyond formal qualification. God sees capacity that systems cannot measure. That through favor, doors open that effort alone could never unlock. Placing individuals in positions where growth continues through learning and reliance on divine guidance. It is important to understand that favor does not replace effort, it directs it. Effort without favor can become frustrating, while favor without effort becomes irresponsible. When favor is present, effort becomes effective because it is applied in the right places. Energy is no longer wasted on closed doors. The individual senses where to invest time and where to wait. This discernment preserves strength and increases impact. Favor also shifts dependency. Instead of relying solely on personal strength or strategy, the individual learns to depend on divine guidance. This dependence fosters humility and awareness. Success is not attributed solely to personal ability, but recognized as a result of divine involvement. This awareness protects the heart from pride and keeps favor active. Ultimately, favor opens doors that effort alone cannot open because it operates beyond human limitation. It rearranges timing, influences perception, and grants access where natural means fall short. This does not diminish the value of effort. It elevates its effectiveness. When effort and favor work together, progress becomes purposeful rather than exhausting. The individual moves forward not by force, but by alignment with divine orchestration. They're experiencing opportunities that effort alone would never be able to secure or sustain. Misunderstanding favor often leads to subtle but serious distortions in attitude, behavior, and dependence. When favor is seen as a personal possession rather than a divine trust, pride quietly takes root. The individual begins to interpret access, recognition, and success as evidence of superiority rather than responsibility. Gratitude is replaced with self-admiration, and humility gives way to entitlement. This pride may not appear outwardly aggressive at first, but it expresses itself through resistance to correction, disregard for process, and an inflated sense of importance over time. This posture weakens spiritual sensitivity and disconnects favor from its source. Another danger of misunderstanding favor is misuse. When favor is treated as a tool for self-promotion rather than service, its purpose is distorted. Influence becomes about visibility instead of impact. An opportunity becomes a means of personal advancement rather than contribution. The individual may begin to exploit access for personal gain, using relationships, platforms, or authority to satisfy ego or ambition. This misuse drains favor of its spiritual substance, leaving behind only temporary advantage. What was meant to advance divine purpose becomes centered on self-interest, and the grace that once opened doors begins to withdraw quietly. Dependency is another consequence of misunderstanding favor. Instead of relying on God, the individual begins to rely on people, systems, or past successes. Because favor often operates through human channels, there is a temptation to mistake the channel for the source. Relationships become idols, connections become security, and approval becomes necessary for confidence. This dependency creates fear of loss and compromises integrity. Their decisions are shaped by the desire to preserve access rather than to remain aligned with truth. When favor is misunderstood in this way, freedom is lost and anxiety increases. Misunderstood favor also weakens discernment. When success is assumed to validate every decision, the individual may stop evaluating motives and direction. Progress becomes the measure of correctness, and growth becomes proof of alignment. That this mindset is dangerous because favor can operate temporarily even when direction begins to drift. Without discernment, warning signs are ignored and boundaries are crossed. What begins as confidence slowly becomes presumption. The individual assumes divine approval where there may only be temporary permission. Another subtle effect is comparison. When favor is misunderstood, it is often measured against others. Instead of gratitude, jealousy arises, either in oneself or in those observing. The individual may begin to guard favor competitively, fearing replacement or loss. This competition distorts relationships and undermines unity. For favor was never meant to isolate or elevate one person at the expense of others, but misunderstanding turns it into a status symbol rather than a responsibility. Misunderstanding favor also produces impatience. Because favor accelerates outcomes, the individual may begin to expect speed in every area of life. Waiting becomes frustrating and process feels unnecessary. This impatience leads to shortcuts, compromises, and strained decisions. The person forgets that favor may open doors, but growth still requires time. When impatience governs behavior, favor becomes unsustainable because the inner life cannot keep pace with external advancement. At its core, misunderstanding favor disconnects it from reverence. Favor is no longer seen as sacred trust, but as personal entitlement. This shift dulls sensitivity to God's guidance and replaces dependence with assumption. The heart becomes less responsive, less grateful, and less surrendered. Eventually, favor loses its power to transform because it is no longer honored. True understanding restores balance. When favor is recognized as divine assignment rather than personal achievement, humility is preserved, gratitude replaces pride, stewardship replaces misuse, and dependence returns to God rather than people. Favor then remains healthy, purposeful, and effective, functioning not as a source of identity or security, but as a tool through which divine intention continues to flow without corrupting the vessel carrying it. True favor is never designed to terminate on the individual. Its ultimate assignment is to reveal God. When favor rests on a life, it carries visibility, influence, and access. But these are not ends in themselves. They are platforms through which divine reality is meant to be expressed. When favor is rightly understood, the person becomes a signpost rather than a destination. Attention drawn to the individual is gently redirected toward the source of the grace at work. In this way, favor becomes a testimony not of human greatness, but of divine involvement. When favor points back to God, humility naturally governs the heart. The individual remains aware that what is being experienced is not self-generated. Success does not inflate ego because its origin is clearly recognized. Gratitude becomes the dominant posture, and dependence on God deepens rather than diminishes. instead of asking how favor can be used to increase personal status, the heart asks how it can be stewarded to reflect God accurately. This awareness protects favor from corruption and keeps it aligned with its true purpose. Favor that points to God also reshapes communication. Words, decisions, and actions are filtered through the awareness that representation matters. The individual understands that influence carries weight, and that conduct either clarifies or distorts the image of God being revealed. Integrity becomes essential, not for reputation alone, but for witness. How challenges are handled, how people are treated, and how power is exercised all become expressions of the God whose favor is being carried. This perspective also guards against self-centered ambition. When favor is seen as a divine signal rather than personal achievement, comparison loses its power. There is no need to compete for attention or defend position. The individual understands that favor is assigned uniquely and purposefully. Contentment replaces rivalry because identity is no longer tied to prominence. The focus shifts from being seen to being faithful. This inward shift preserves peace and keeps the heart aligned with divine intention. Favor that points to God also impacts how others are treated. Rather than using influence to dominate or impress, the individual becomes a channel of grace to others. Access is used to open doors for those who would otherwise be overlooked. Influence becomes a means of lifting, not controlling. In this way, favor multiplies rather than isolates. Others encounter God not through words alone, but through the atmosphere created by humility, generosity, and service. The life becomes a living witness, demonstrating what divine involvement looks like in human form. Another important dimension is resilience. When favor is centered on God, opposition does not destroy confidence. Criticism, misunderstanding, or loss of human approval no longer threaten identity. The individual remains steady because validation is not derived from applause, but from alignment. Even when favor shifts seasons or expressions, trust remains intact because it was never rooted in visibility. This stability allows the individual to endure transitions without bitterness or fear. Favor that points back to God also redefines success. Success is no longer measured by size, speed, or recognition, but by faithfulness and impact. The individual understands that some of the greatest expressions of favor may never be publicly celebrated. Quiet obedience, unseen service, and consistent integrity are valued as much as visible breakthroughs. This understanding keeps the heart free from pressure and performance-driven living. Ultimately, when favor fulfills its highest purpose, God is made visible through a human life. People are not merely impressed. They are awakened to the reality of divine presence and possibility. The individual carrying favor becomes a mirror reflecting something greater than themselves. In this reflection, hearts are drawn not to the vessel, but to the source. Favor then completes its assignment, not by elevating a person endlessly, but by revealing a God whose grace is active, intentional, and transformative in the world. Favor is a sacred expression of grace, not a random advantage or personal reward. It begins with divine alignment, is amplified by grace, and is sustained only through character, humility, and dependence on God. When rightly understood, favor opens doors effort alone cannot open, grants access beyond natural limitation, and positions a life to serve purposes greater than self. Yet favor must be stewarded with reverence, or it becomes a source of pride, misuse, and misplaced dependence. Its highest purpose is not visibility or elevation, but revelation, to make God known through a yielded life. When favor points back to God, it remains pure, powerful, and enduring, transforming not just outcomes, but hearts, systems, and generations through the quiet yet undeniable hand of divine grace.